This is Campaign Terrain. I am your host, That Guy Cross. This is episode 27, and today we'll be painting the Dais and monoliths that I created 2 episodes ago in 25, and we're going to do a couple of interesting techniques for it. But this one's going to be really simple. All you're going to need is some paints, paintbrushes, some baking soda or sand, and a wash. So stick around, and I'll see you right after the bump. Thanks for coming to Campaign Terrain. As you can see, this is washed out here in the camera. Need some color on it. Let me show you how I did that. I have 2 sets of samples that I made up. You'll see those in a minute. There'll be a quick video. And they have a base coat of the gray on all of them. They either have an undercoat of blue and green blotched together or red and yellow blotched together. And then they're hit over that. I flipped them so that there's a sample of each with either a gray overwash and then, or overbrush and then dry wash, or a brown overbrush and then dry brush. I've opted to go with the red and yellow under and the brown over. I think that looks the best for what I'm going for, so it's going to look like this. For that, I've used, you can use any dark red. I happen to have used burnt sienna. For the yellow, this one I don't even think has a color, it's just yellow. This came from Dollar Tree. And then over those, I put those together and they sort of wet blended. I let those dry. Afterwards, I came up by with an overbrush, which is a sort of a heavy dry brush of just a brown. This one happens to be Martha Stewart's, but it can be any one. And then I've hit it with a dry brush. That was still a slight bit damp, but it didn't seem to blend too much because it was already such a thin coat. And I hit that with a beige. This happens to be Beachcomber Beige by Apple Barrel. Now this is a gloss. It doesn't seem to have made too much difference. Finally, to bring out the texture that I had made with my undercoat and baking soda and where I had carved the glyphs in it, I hit it with a wash. Now, I used a brown wash. They come in however you want. You can make your own, or you can get them in like 20 different colors. Greens, grays, blues, whichever. I had to use a brown for this, and I think it worked out well, so I'm going with this color. There's going to be a quick video here in a minute that's sped up really fast. It's showing exactly what I just told you. You'll be seeing me put things on in diagonals, then you'll be seeing me hit the overtones on them, etc. Then I'll come back and talk about doing the wash, and then I'll actually get into painting the real McCoy. See you in just a sec. Finished the video snippet of just setting these samples up, my prototypes for what I want to do for my paint job. And after that, I decided I just couldn't stand the gray on gray on gray. It's horrible to me. It's just bland. So I went back over the two that had the gray rather than the brown colors, and I hit them with both a white and a tan overbrush or dry brush to try to get, hold on, let me get focused here. There we go. To try to get a better look at the texture on those. So I've hit them with the tan and the white, and since I've shown all the other colors, let me show you what white I used for that. That's this Snow White Apple Barrel. And you'll see a picture of all of those except for that white at the end. I've already taken a picture of all of them lined up, but they'll be listed in the description below if I remember to do that. So here is the red and yellow under with the gray over, dry brushed or double dry brushed. Here is the blue and green with the gray over, double dry brushed. Here's the red and yellow with the brown over, and here's the blue and green with the brown over. And I really can't decide of the two with the brown which one to go with. I like both of them, but I think to give it a little more pop, I'm going to go ahead and use the red and yellow. Why will you not focus today? So I think I'm going to use that for the standing stones, and I may do the blue and green on the surface where I didn't put texture on the monoliths. So I will get to that tomorrow, but first I'm going to put a wash on these just to make sure that they show up nice, and I'll do the I'll finish off the monoliths tomorrow, the whole dais and everything tomorrow. Now, holy cow! As you can see, this is my brown wash, and sometimes because, you know, it's on camera, so why should it be easy, I can't get the lid off. Just a second. Oh, chinkies. So that's my brown wash, and one of these days I'm going to do a whole thing on how I make my washes and all of that, but this is my brown one. I've also got a gray one, a green one, etc. So I'm going to use the brown wash, be really liberal, take a whole bunch of that on the paintbrush, just dip it straight on in there, and just drizzle it kind of everywhere. Now really, what I'm trying to do is mostly fill in the inside of the runes so that they gives a good shadow inside them. Now I have an extra benefit here on these examples because they're laying down flat. The ones that I'm doing on the piece itself, I've already glued on. Maybe not a good idea for next time. So I'm gonna have to hope it sticks into a vertical hole. So applied that really liberally. What the heck, I'll hit these two. And there's no rhyme or reason to this, just slather the whole thing. Now, these are a little bit dry, but they're not completely dry, so I'm trying to be a little bit careful not to take the paint right off. But I'm really not pressing, I'm basically just slathering the brown around. Which will reactivate the paint, but hopefully my fingers will be off it before it does. Okay, don't let these touch. I don't want them to pool up in weird spots because they're touching each other. So, Put my lid back on. Rinse off my fingers first. I got kind of covered. And rinse the wash out. Now this is really easy since part of my wash is basically a floor polish. So it's essentially got a detergent built in. Makes cleaning a brush really easy. Alright, that's it. I'll see you in the morning. Okay, gonna slap a quick base coat on here. Gray base coat. It's okay if I get a little extra in there because it's going to be used for the monoliths in a second. For right now, I'm just doing the smaller pieces and the dais. Remember, don't drink the rinse water. Bad stuff happen. I don't know. Maybe. But don't drink the rinse water. Start with a wettish brush. Doesn't have to be super damp. We're just trying to get it to flow well into all the nooks and crannies. This stuff's pretty thick with the glue in it, so. I'm really right-handed, so I'm sorry if you can't see most of this on the screen, but you get the idea. We're just doing a liberal coat, everything. It's a base coat, going to cover everything up. Now, this has a white foam underneath it, and since this is half glue, it's going to dry a little less opaque than you might expect. So there may be a paleness to the foam after it comes through the drying process there. I do not worry about that. All the other paints are going to cover that right up. I'm not going to do a second coat. With all this glue and all this paint in here, it's well coated, even if it looks a little thin later. But I promise that it's going to look just fine in the finished product. So I am not doing 2 undercoats on this. I'm just doing this one here. And this counts as a primer, base coat, all of it. This is going to be our bottom layer. This is where most of that gray and that rock comes from. Now the top part's going to be the part that's all pretty and you need to see it all the time. So we're going to put the bottom on the drying mat rack. I am not going to bother painting the bottom of this because essentially you'll never see it. That other piece may get turned over during play, the capstone. So that's why I went ahead and painted it. This one, I'm not gonna. Alright, that's everything for the regular base coat. Now with the baking soda, there's no craziness to it. You just take the baking soda, dump it in. Use whatever you want to mix it up. I have this metal hook, which works really well because it works essentially like a blender. And mix those in till you get a texture you like. Basically, you're looking for spreadable but thick, and it does not hurt if it's got grit in it, but you don't want any of the chunks really left. Now you take the thicker paint and we'll start to just paint it on just like we did with the base coat, only with the towers. I don't know if you can see that, but definitely wanting to get that down into these recesses, down inside the runes. There we go. down in these recesses down here. You want to get these really good down into all these grooves. You may have to wet the brush to get the paint to go down in there. Now, this paint with the glue in it and the latex itself, or not latex, acrylic itself, it will retract down into those grooves. So it looks like you may be filling your grooves with paint, and you are to an extent. You want to minimize that. You want to make sure there's full coverage, but try to get some of that out. But most of that is going to recede and shrink in as the paint dries. So just keep that in mind. And then this is about to get really boring, so I'm either going to speed this up or skip it entirely. And I will see you after this is all dry. Those are dry. Let's jump into the reddish brown and the yellow. So the little altar and the cover up plate are done. The altar needs a little bit of touch up. Take care of that in just a sec. The plate looks good, but I did miss a spot earlier, so I'm going to touch both of those up real quick. Now, these are just going to be little blotches done in sort of a diagonal so that they look sort of marbled or like they were laid down in layers. However, you want to start with the lighter color. I just think that it works easier that way in case you spread the other one around. You don't, I don't know, I just think it looks better. I'm using kind of a ratty brush here. Love these brushes though, they work really well for what I need them for. So this one is going to become sort of a stipple at an angle across each one. I'm going to do one of these in yellow and then fast forward or skip over and then come back with the reds and show you what's up. You see that? Yep, there you go. See how that's sort of diagonal across there? Then on the sides, you just want to follow those same sides around, those same lines around. Essentially, we're creating like a barber pole type thing, for those of you who are old enough to remember barber poles. That's that yellow one done, all the way around. I'm going to do these other four and then I'll be back to show you the red. Almost done. Just been taking a little bit of the red. Again, I put way too much on my palette. I do that more often than not. But that's okay. I'm taking a bit wider brush and I'm, instead of going through like between narrow, I'm going crosswise with the brush and I am blotting. I am not brushing it at all. So just going along between each of the lines of the yellow and just following them along around the block. Now the occasional mess up where I hit the bottom of the rock where I hit the dais is not going to matter because I can just cover up any mistakes or whichever with foliage in next week's episode. So there may be moss or little clumps of grass or whichever by the time this is all said and done. So right now, it's not going to matter if I mess up a little and get outside the lines, so to speak. So off. That's a little much right there. You can always just take it and smear it off a little and then reblot it. It doesn't even matter if you reblot it. This is all going to get covered up by 2 more layers of paint and a layer of wash. So a lot of the mistakes will just disappear on you, which is great because it makes it a more natural, less uniform piece. So that is everything painted from the ground up except for the top coat and the overbrush and the dry brush. So I'm gonna let this dry. That's not gonna take very long. Not that it matters to you. It's only takes seconds for you. And then I will be right back and we will hit all of this with the brown. Right, everything's dried up. You'll notice that those colors come out a lot more muted after they dry. No longer looks like, a 3-year-old's birthday party or whatever. So we're gonna go ahead and cover these in the brown overwash. So let me grab a palette real quick. Now this overwash is going on all 3 pieces. Even though these don't have the red and yellow, they're still getting the brown and tan. So I'm gonna go ahead and knock those out of the way real quick. Now this is sort of like a dry brush, so I'm going to be using a dry brush. I'm not using a wet brush for this. I'm going to sort of load it up with paint, make sure there's paint in between the bristles, but you don't want it just sopping with the paint when you're done. So go ahead and smear some of that out. I'm going to go to a place where it's a little bit hidden. Let's try the bottom of the altar here. Here we go. That's still a little much. Get rid of some of that. There you go. We're just going to get this. We're going for, I don't know, 75-80% coverage. Trying to pull out a bunch of the texture without really covering up the surface area entire. So alright, this dries quick, and I can tell you right now, I'm already sticking to it. It's drying that quick. So, alright, let's go ahead and continue with the main part here. Now, this is going to be really boring. You've seen how it works, so I'm just going to show you. Take most of the paint off, but not all of it, and then begin to hit all of the stone. That's the uprights and the floor. So I'm going to go ahead and hit that, and then I'll be right back. So, got those coated up. I've got a coat of brown on all of it. It looks sort of bland right now, but you can see the color through it. It does break it up a little. And so it's ready for the final dry wash. Dry brush. I keep saying dry wash. Dry brush. And let's go ahead and start that, and then I'll show you, and then I'll just jump to the end where that's done. Now, for a dry brush, I have found that makeup brushes work really, really well. This one happens to work great for me, so all I'm going to do, a little bit of that tan. Should need less of this than I needed for the brown, but just to make sure. Okay, now on this, you need to be much less paint, have much less paint in the bristles than with the brown. So I am going to load this up a little just to make sure that we're getting coverage, and then wiping out like 90-95% of that. Then brush it until it's barely coming out. You can check it on your skin if you want, and then once you have it where you like it, same deal. Just come across it, and all we're doing is trying to pick up the details like edge lines, ridges in the thing, that sort of thing. You do not want, this is not for coverage, this is for highlighting. So I'm going to hit all 3 of these pieces, be right back. As you can see, I've gotten about 90-95% of this done. I'm a little heavy-handed, so my dry brush goes sort of a long way. Here's a little bit darker one you can see. This one's that first one I did, and it starts to darken up a little bit. But I wanted to save this last obelisk, minier, whatever you want to call it, to show you. This is what it looked like before dry brushing, and these are what they look like after. Okay, so those have all had a little bit of a chance to dry. I've got those over there already coated. As you can see, I've dripped it everywhere because, like I said, you can be liberal with this. Now you're going to want to get this into all the nooks and crannies so it brings those out. And you want it to be everywhere, but you specifically want it to gather in the recesses. Now, a lot of times washes are made with a detergent or a soap, something like that, so they can bubble, especially if you shake them up rather than stir them with the brush. If you get any bubbles, you want to pop those. There were some right there. You want to pop those or move them to the side and get them out of the way, just because it can make your project look a little like it's got ringworm. So you don't want any bubbles stuck in it. But as far as how much you put on it, you can literally just douse it. You could dunk it in a bucket of it if you had it, and just let it all run off, and it'll fill the nooks and crannies just exactly like it's supposed to. Just make sure you cover all of the surface area. So that's it for the wash. I'll be right back with the finished version. So there you have it. 4 colors in a wash and a little bit of patience, and you make fantastic terrain that you can play with for years. Next week we're going to put a little vegetation on this, put the final touch on that, but for now, it's basically done. Thanks for coming. Like, share, and subscribe. Various links in the bottom down there. One of these days, those may be some Amazon links. In the meantime, just enjoy. Thanks for coming. I love y'all. And until next time, I wish you luck in your campaign.